on with the agenda, and really pleased to invite Faye, who is from Prevista, who are a prime contractor. So a little bit, I've asked her to talk about why they're getting involved in this type of, or why they become a prime. But I think from chatting to her the other day, there's a really interesting conversation that she's keen to have about what they're looking for in their supply chain. And hopefully for some of us in smaller organisations, that gives us a bit of an insight in what the big organisations are looking for us to come along. But I think also for Faye, actually a bit of an understanding of what people within the housing sector, what we've got to offer, how we can contribute, because at the end of the day, we're all in there for the same purpose, to get people into work, and often those furthest from the labour market and with the most barriers to face. So Faye, hopefully you're there somewhere and you're happy to come in. Faye, are you there?
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh.
I was muted.
That's okay. Thanks, welcome.
Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen. If I can, here we go. So, hi everybody. Hopefully you can see the screen.
Yep.
Yes, okay, so my name is Faye Thomas, and oh, hang on a second. I think I've got the wrong presentation. Stop presenting.
That was the top secret one that she
that
was.
One of, I was right. Okay, how can
I forgot to say that actually Faye, when I was chatting to her yesterday, has got a meeting with the DWP in a couple of weeks' time, talking about sort of the framework and how it's going to unroll. So hopefully the conversation we have today, Faye will be able to take that into that meeting. So it's a good time to be having a chat with Faye.
Right, from the beginning. Right, is that better? How can we influence the CAEHRS commissioning process to support social housing provider residents? Yes?
Yep.
Great, okay. Apologies for that. So yes, Prevista, I'll quickly say who we are. Thank you for inviting me to come today. So we have secured a place on tier 1, tier 2, sorry, in London and the home counties. I'm guessing that most of you know quite a bit about CAEHRS already, but I might do just a little recap and share some information with you. And then I really would like to just get into the meat of really the discussion and how we can share information to influence this process. So Prevista, we started 26 years ago. We have wandered, like everybody else, through from business support to employability to skills. And we've been doing that for quite some time. And in 1920, this just gives information about how many people we've supported. So over the years, we've supported 4,000 unemployed and low-skilled people onto apprenticeships and progression in work, 2,000 plus young people, 2,000 businesses, and 1,000, nearly 1,500 low-skilled or unemployed people to get qualifications and progress in work. And we are good learner engagement. We call them learners, participants. We wash through a number of ways of describing people. Job Centre Plus use DWP use customers, but we've been going for quite some time, and we are very much an organisation that works with supply chain partners to deliver, and we are Merlin accredited and have been for quite some time in terms of our supply chain management processes, and we abide by the DWP and Education Skills Funding Agency supply chain management funding rules in order to make sure that supply chain partners don't take disproportionate risk when delivering on prime contracts. Okay, that didn't want to go. Right, okay. So in terms of quality, just to give you a little bit of a flavour, we are Ofsted grade 2. We've 95% success rate in our skills programs, 98% maths and English, apprenticeship success rates are 82%, and we have particular success. We have greater degrees of success with our participants who describe themselves as disabled over and above all other learners, which I think, whilst many of that is based in the skills space, because that's where we have been operating in within the last sort of 2 years, it does show that we are very good at engaging a broad range of people. And then on the right hand side is just a list of the types of activities and programs that we deliver, and most recently wandered into Kickstart, and the very complex landscape that Kickstart is turning out to be. So our vision as an organisation, there we are, to create possibilities and transformation within our communities, so similar and aligned to social housing providers. And very much we are looking to create a career ladder for all the participants who touch us, regardless of what age they are in. So we run employability and traineeships that can now work into Kickstart. We then, through InWork CAEHRS, help people with apprenticeships and further skills training so that they can get progression in work, promotion, and move on to degree apprenticeships where appropriate. And despite all of this craziness that's going on at the moment, and indeed it's been difficult for many people, we've been able to maintain our engagement with everybody that we work with and support, keeping about 84% of significant monthly engagement. So that's people demonstrating and actively participating in a workshop, a session, an interview on a monthly basis. About 84% of our total cohort of about nearly 4,500 people who we're working with currently, which I think is quite positive. And that's including people who have been furloughed and people who have been made redundant, sadly. So CAEHRS, you're pretty much all, I imagine, quite clear about that. It's for the 5 years and the framework has been announced. And Tier 3, you may well have seen that there's been a recent questionnaire that can be accessed through JAGA, or the new Bravo platform, for the design for Tier 3, particularly for SMEs and voluntary sector organisations. And I think that closes on the 20th of November. So this is quite a complicated screen, but I don't know if everybody has got all the details of where everybody is on Tier 1, Tier 2, and national. So I can share this very simple screen with you if you don't have it already. But as you can see, Prevista, we only applied to go on to Tier 2 in London and the home counties, and we got 100% success rate in our bid writing, so I'm quite pleased about that. So social housing and unemployment, from the information that I can see, the sector, obviously, you know how big your sector is. And I think in particular, the residents that you support have some unique challenges, particularly in the demographics and the group that they are, but also the fact that the big desire to work from home, is there enough space in social housing? How can that work? But having said that, housing associations are quite well placed to make positive interventions because of the relationships that you have. You operate in some of the country's most deprived areas, and you take a long-term view. So I've worked with housing associations in partnership before, where we've supported their sort of critical intervention teams, and employment is part of that solution so that people don't lose their tenancies, to help them get into a pattern of being able to regularly pay their tenancies and increase their employability. So it would seem to me that very much so housing associations have a big part to play in the employability landscape. Now, we've recently been, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but it's recently been announced, or not announced, but it's on the grapevine, that there will be a long-term unemployed programme launched the first week in December, which will break down into sublots. London and the home counties, for example, would be split into 3 contract package areas. And there's 1 contract package area per CPA, so 1 contract. And the contracts would be worth about £1 million per annum, so quite big, obviously. And 70% of the payments will be for outcomes. It seems at the moment, and Elizabeth might be closer to this than myself, that there'll be no skills or work progression. It's pretty much get someone in a job and keep them in it. 6 months. So probably there'll be short and sustained job outcomes if you align it with other commissioned models recently. There will be restrictions in terms of the number of contracts per organisation, and the top 3 bids will go to competitive dialogue and contracts to go live by June next year. That's as much information as I have, and that may be subject to change, but this is probably the first sort of major commissioning piece that's coming out, and it will be for tier 1 organisations only. So my previous table shows you which organisations in which areas will be able to bid. So the issues most recently, and I attended a webinar yesterday where Stephen Evans presented research from the Learning and Work Institute that pretty much said the long-term unemployment rate will hit 1.6 million and remain at 1 million for 4 years. And that in the areas where social housing residents are, it's likely again that there'll be an unequal impact to those customers. There's also the issue of the avalanche of furloughed workers being made redundant, because for many of them, they've already sort of been unemployed from April to October, and then they join the claimant count. So there would have been 12 months unemployed pretty much when you hit March next year. And the sectors that social housing residents tend to be more weighted in terms of where they work are in those sectors that have been particularly badly hit by the pandemic. So in the social care, in retail and hospitality, they're overrepresented in social housing care residents. And then we have the continued uncertainty of the pandemic and the impact on the economy and how that's going to recover, which are challenges. So really, this is now the Q&A piece, because as Nick mentioned, I have a meeting, my first meeting with DWP next week with Nick and other DWP members actually. And what we'd really like to do is make sure that that discussion is as informed as possible, and that we can try to inform as much as we can, because I do think that the primes on the CAEHRS framework can band together and have a voice in order, and I know Pinnacle are one of the housing associations that are actually tier 1 on the CAEHRS framework, are quite a powerful voice in order to influence the commissioning process. So I'm going to stop my share at the moment and go back to you really, and just ask, how can we, which customers should we target? How much localism should we have? What program design there should be? From a housing association perspective, and that was really what I wanted, and I think what would be best for you, using myself as a vehicle to communicate, is for you to share your thoughts and comments so that I can take those directly back to DWP and indeed inform our delivery modelling. If that, I think that'd probably be a good place to start. So I'm going to open it out really and take some questions, and if people would be, please just join in. And this is being recorded, so I'll be able to use and contain that information. So over to everybody there.
Okay, so if anybody wants to contribute, put your hand up. A couple of observations from me. It was interesting, there was a session about the all-party parliamentary group on housing, and I think it was Bob Kerslake was talking about housing, the link between housing and unemployment, and sort of reminded us all to remember that people come to us in housing need. They may be homeless, they may be come through domestic violence or whatever the issues, and therefore housing is not the barrier. Actually, housing is part of the solution to that person. And good housing can provide that platform both to secure accommodation for your family, but actually getting back into work for those people. So we have a really big role to play on that. It's interesting, particular area of ours locally, Faye, where I've got an interest in tracking unemployment there. So the credit crunch, it just suddenly was much higher than everybody else. It is a poorly skilled community, unfortunately, but we did close the gap through various people working together, employment agencies. But even before this sort of COVID recession, if you can call it that, there was a recession in the offing, and you were seeing unemployment begin to creep there. So, and it is predominantly 70% social housing, this ward. They are the first to lose their jobs. They do get back into work. It was a working community, but they lost their jobs. And now in White Forest, they're hitting 10% unemployment, whereas other bits of White Forest, it's sort of between 5 and 6. So disproportionately, this working community have been the victims of this recession. So I think there's some interesting bits there. The other thing about localism, I mean, we're looking after a BBO contract. We did have a employment engagement officer, and that's great with the big employers, but absolutely the job coaches with their local knowledge working particular areas knew what was happening locally, whether it was in Evesham a horticultural firm opening up and the job opportunities there, and therefore that flavour of localism, both in understanding the local jobs economy and the community around them, we think worked really well in accessing those hundreds of thousands of small jobs out and about there. Is anybody else wanting to contribute? I can't see any hands, but switch on your screen and your microphone if you want to participate.
Mike, Nick, whilst someone's about to join in, I think my experience, just to give some people some, so I now live in Ramsgate. I used to live in Waltham Forest, and I now live in Ramsgate, and it's absolutely so very different in terms of the employment rate and the demographics of who's unemployed. And I absolutely agree with you. I look out my window and I see Ramsgate, and I know that when we've had people, work coaches on the ground, they can work with local businesses to job carve and create jobs and opportunities. Also, they have the ability, when you've got in social housing, we're working with social housing providers, enable to build the confidence for those residents maybe who've had such a knockback to come out and engage with the community with a trusted employer or a friend or a neighbour. And there's so much more that sort of local neighbour can do to create sustainable opportunities for people in work. And then the one final point really is we know that social housing residents in those sectors have been hit the hardest, but also the sooner that we pick someone up, help them and support them before they move into a long-term unemployment bracket, then the better that is for them and themselves. So I can see a couple of hands coming up now, so I'm gonna hand over to you, Nick.
Right, so I can see first off in my list, Deborah, do you want to come online? Deborah, are you there somewhere? Whilst we're waiting for Deborah, there was a comment from Sarah. I don't know if you want to add to this, Sarah, about the digital divide in housing. It's an interesting one for us. We're desperate to get more of our tenants online so they can access our services, because clearly there's savings in that, but it does give us then resources to help people who are not digitally enabled. So I think certainly there's lots of work being done around digital. It's a bit fragmented, but it is an issue for us. Sarah, did you want to add anything to that?
Hi, sorry, I was just getting off mute. Yeah, no, we're quite a small SME housing provider, and a lot of our clients are single homeless, and they don't have that, the money available to get like internet and stuff, and it's quite costly for us. So just wondering, is it possible to raise with DWP if they could try and help people with access to digital so that they are digitally included?
I think it's a good point, Sarah, in terms of, I know that the Greater London Association, the GLA, have launched a programme connected to ESF to support people. Prevista ourselves, on our young people's provision, traineeship provision, whilst everyone thinks that young people have got phones, they don't have loads of data, and the amount of data that they have is minimal. And then the ability, we saw it in, many conversations, one phone or one tablet shared between, 4 or 5 people in a family, or even just having that. So we made a decision to, and I don't know how we'll do it in a large scale program for on our traineeship provision. We had to buy laptops and tablets, and we had to buy data, and it was costly for us commercially at the front end, but we recovered that later on by achieving the outcomes. But you've got to have the financial resource to be able to do that. But that's absolutely something that we need to raise with DWP.
Thank you.
Deborah, I think you're going to try again. Technology not working. Is there anybody else that wants to come in? I think that data one was interesting because the DWP, I think it was them, recently run that grant program for ESF programs to get them digital. But by the time we got notification, went online to try and buy the equipment and in a certain price bracket, and then we had lockdown. We just couldn't deliver it, and the risks that if you only deliver 199 and not 200, you don't get any money. We had to say, look, we can't do this, and it's a massive loss. But we just, we're leading a consortium. All the risk would have hit us, and we couldn't afford to do it, which was a crying shame. And they took a month to make a decision on something that was lasting 3 months. Most disappointing.
I think you're right there, very much so. And many people looked at the level of risk, the share of risk, and the fact that you had to meet your numbers absolutely, otherwise you wouldn't draw down the full funding. Was definitely something that was a problem.
Nobody else is coming in, so sorry, I'm hogging this. Another observation from me. I think you've got these job outcomes of 70%, which is fine. The problem is where we're going to have long-term unemployment for a long period of time. Is there not some sort of payment just for keeping people engaged, so they don't give up hope that they're never going to get a job and just lose the will to sort of keep on job hunting? So actually, can the DWP have some sort of outcome where particularly local providers are working with those furthest from the job market? They may not go to college or big training, but absolutely keeping them engaged, keeping them volunteering, keeping them their CVs up to date with that experience is just as important. It's a bit like family intervention work we've done before. It's not going to happen in a short period. This is a long term over the next few years until we get unemployment down, but keeping that group. Deborah, I think you're hopefully going to try again. We had to admit you again. Deborah?
Can you hear me this time?
Oh, yes. Brilliant. Thank you.
I apologise. We've got a software update about to happen in the next couple of days, so that should help us this end. I'm from Vivid Homes, so a largest geographically based housing association in Hampshire, and I'm employment and training officer. I just wanted to come in on a few of the points about and confirm that we do, as an industry, as a sector, have residents that do have a great many issues, and you are right. Part of that is they're the people that can actually access and are referred and are successful in their bids for social housing. What I've been finding though, we've got a real mix in the last, from March, our customer base has changed for our service significantly, and we've got many of those who've been furloughed or made redundant. But what we're finding is a very big issue is the lack of logistics, the lack of transport, where transportation companies, bus companies, have significantly reduced their routes and their services in some areas by up to 70%. So where they could access jobs and they were working in local towns and areas, they're no longer able to do this. And that has had a huge impact on their ability to access work, because we've split shifts in warehousing, where warehouses are now working 24/7, where they were working sort of on 18-hour shifts. You can't get anywhere at 6 o'clock in the morning. You certainly can't get home at 11 o'clock at night. So that's been I know that's outside our control, but it's had a huge impact on where our customers can access work. The other thing is, you're absolutely right, and I back up completely about the digital poverty aspect. We've got many people who've got devices and have got very little data on their contracts, so they can't access any online training because that takes gigabytes and not 2 to 5 megabytes. And we're finding that is a real barrier. And I had a conversation.
Oh.
Sorry, I got muted. Did someone want to stop me talking?
No, I think someone. Okay.
And
yeah,
I was just going to say, I had a conversation this morning with the DWP locally, and I raised about the access to Wi-Fi and data packages and dongles, and they said no one had raised it with them on a local level, which I find strange. So I did raise that, but it is a real issue for our guys, which is access to the data. So they have devices in many instances, but can't use them for anything other than Facebook, sending off a CV, and certainly can't fill in application forms on some of their devices. So that was just our impact. But having said that, we are managing to find people roles, but very much not in the industries that they were working in previously.
Okay, I've got a couple more people. Jackie Carpenter.
Hello. Yes, so my question really is going back to what you were saying about the risk. I mean, I totally agree with everything people have said so far about the data issue, and we do need to keep raising it. But as an organisation, we're an SME, and I work with the same people as Sarah. We have to think very carefully about taking on a risk. And if the risk was that you have to get 100% of your target, or you get no money at all, and you have to upfront all the monies to deliver the programme, then that would be seen as an unacceptable risk. So I think if they're going to be serious about being really local, because that's what we are, we're local, we're embedded in our community, or lots of communities, then they need to think carefully, or somebody needs to think carefully about how to manage that risk. And this a bit ties in with what you were saying, Nick, about payments for keeping people engaged. It's too much of a blunt instrument at the minute. It's a job, and a sustainable job, or nothing. And there needs to be some sort of nuance and some sort of staged payments, I think, and some kind of upfront something for having worked with the individuals. And other programs seem to manage, other things that we've been commissioned for seem to manage with, you have a target of 100 people, you achieve 98, and they say, okay, at the end, we think that's good enough. We'll accept the 2 people that you didn't, the 2% you didn't reach. I don't know why DWP can't adopt that approach. But obviously, if you have a contract management approach throughout, if you look at it quarterly, you'll know if the organisation is 25% behind target, then something serious has to be done. But if they're only 2% behind target, then carry on. You see what I'm saying?
Nick, you're muted.
Background noise of grandchildren running around. Right, so I'm going to go to Mark and then give Faye an opportunity to round up, and then we'll move on to the next item. So Mark, you put your hand up.
Oh, hi. Yeah, so I actually, just on the back of the comment about public transport, obviously some companies will restrict their services. I actually work for a public a bus company. Obviously, we've got a finite sort of number of buses, and with the restrictions, that's obviously causing some issues. I know in our area, sort of Riva, we're running a majority of our services, so just a bit of reassurance there. But is transport something that people have thought about how they can work with transport companies to encourage people to get people back on the job ladder? Because I know we work quite closely with Housing Association, employability schemes, all manner of schemes. Just wondered what everyone's thoughts on the transport side of it was, really.
Now, so thanks for that contribution. If people have got thoughts, ping them back into Laura or any of us, and we can share them on with you.
Hey, thank you.
And people may come up in other bits of the conversation. So yeah, Faye, over to you.
Hi. I will just extend that. So I'm intending to do a couple of workshops with people who would be interested in being in our supply chain to help us design our delivery models, so that we don't just go into a box somewhere and create something and then get everybody to fill out very lengthy EOIs. So I'd rather actually, because we all tire of EOIs and every prime cuts them slightly differently. So all you do is end up feeding an EOI machine and it goes when you don't hear anything. So I'd rather do something that's a little bit more organic. So I will share my details with Nick, Elizabeth and Laura, just to if people are interested in just joining a straightforward workshop about what are we going to propose actually the delivery model will be. In 2 points, the payment model, DWP before have done service levels / outcomes payment models, and indeed in specialist employment support they did a 50% service fee, which was a monthly payment, and then there was a 50% outcome payment, which was split on 13 and 26 weeks in employment. And it would definitely seem the first program that's being launched, the Tier 1 program that's being launched in December, is a bread and butter work program style program, high volume, get them a job, keep them for 6 months, and that will hit those that are the nearest to the labour market, those who've just dropped out, who've got digital skills, who can get jobs in where the vacancies are at the moment. It will do nothing to actually hit the proper long-term unemployed cohort and those that are actually launching into that. And those are the programs that need that greater share of risk and a better funding model in order to actually really make the impact. And that's where it'll be better for some of the organisations, I believe, on this round table to engage. And that's what we really need to push DWP to do, is for those groups that are not pilot high and get them in a job, get them in a job, get them in a job. I mean, that 6 months isn't a long time in a job. That they can turn over as well, you know. But on the other more targeted programs, there's definitely, and I'm definitely an advocate of that, and believe that there's an ability to influence that. I'm positive. Anyway, thank you so much for inviting me today. I've got quite a bit out of that, and I'll leave my email details, and you can reach out to me directly as well.
And you can put us on the chat, Faye, if you want to, straight away. But no, thanks for coming along and participating and sharing what you're doing. That's really appreciated. So I'm going to pass over to Elizabeth, who is, yep, she's off mute. Elizabeth, just give an update on the work program, whatever it's called these days, the new one, and also the Tier 3 providers, and also Kickstart. Great success, I think, for the housing sector with Clarion's work around that. So lots to celebrate there. Elizabeth.
Okay, so I'll be really quick because I think there's been some great discussions and hopefully more to come on the forum this morning. Many I'm sure will know because you've been involved in some of our recent events around the market engagement and the new Tier 1 and Tier 2 providers. But I think what ERSA tries to do in the context of the housing sector and the employment support sector is bring housing providers to the table to the other players. And we do that in the same way with local authorities and with local charities and specialist organisations. But I think it's just really important to point out that ERSA is that broad church of people who are working around employment support. And I'm sure the agenda changes as we move 20 into 2021, where we see that sort of thing where we've had the health crisis, the economic crisis, the huge numbers of people that are unemployed, and potentially a housing problem very close to us now, where people are getting to very vulnerable housing because they're losing work. So I think we will continue to try and bring that sort of broad agenda to the wider sector. We have done a series of events around meeting the organisations that are on Tier 1 and Tier 2 of the new framework, known as CAEHRS, which is the commercial agreement with the DWP. Faye is absolutely spot on. That was a great presentation. That at the beginning of December, there will be an announcement about a programme for long-term unemployed. And as soon as the ITT is out, ERSA will run an event that sort of disseminates that information to the market. Little to say about Tier 2 yet, but just would like to bring to everybody's attention that there has been a consultation around what the DWP might procure through Tier 3 and how that will feed in with their flexible support funds and the dynamic purchasing system which they use. We're really hoping that at the spending review, we get some clarification about the shared prosperity fund. Those of you that joined us at the In Conversation with the DWP event will be aware that there was an absence of conversation around shared prosperity. And that was because prior to the event, when I talked to Karina Stibbards from the DWP policy team, she was really clear that they're not in a position to talk about the shared prosperity fund yet. And I didn't want to stifle what was other really good conversation by focusing on shared prosperity. But many of you will know that ERSA did a survey of the sector to bring up to date our Sharing Prosperity report that we launched 12 months ago. And we now have some key core messages around the Shared Prosperity Fund and indeed around the European Social Fund underspend, because there's still a significant amount of money. But at the moment, to access that money, you either have to have an existing contract that can get extended or match for the future. Now, the housing sector has been really good at providing match and creating their own employment support. In fact, Nick, who's chairing us today, comes from an organisation that's working in that sort of building better opportunities world. So I've been talking to Sue Ormiston from the National Lottery, and just lots going on in that space behind the scenes. So let's get beyond the spending review. Hopefully by that end of November, beginning of December, we will know a little bit more about what's available. And I think it's important for that whole agenda around if the DWP's big national programmes, whether it's the JETS extension to the Work and Health programme, or it's the new commissioning of something for long-term unemployed that's really job focused, all the information and the evidence coming out of the think tanks and the policy people is that building back could take 3 to 7 years. And so having provisions that upskill people, that keep people close to the labour market, that are around job creation are really, really important. And that's where the wider sector really comes in, that we make sure that people aren't going to the back of the queue. In terms of ERSA, I think that's everything to say. I suspect people are involved in our Kickstart collaborations. We had a big event, 221 people on it. We've got a regular Kickstart forum. There's a constant chat about Kickstart on Microsoft Teams. Sometimes people are asking questions that have been answered many times before. So I think that chat comes with a little bit of a health warning. But we've got that in now with Nick Riddle, who is clarifying things from the DWP for us. And just finally to say that I had a conversation with 2 ministers last week about the sector, about Kickstart, about all the things we're trying to do, and those added value and community of good practice that we come to the table. So we come to the table with, so I talked to Minz Davis and Will Quince last Wednesday afternoon, both of whom are really interested in joining us at future events. So I think that's the end of the ERSA update. Thanks, Nick.
Any quick questions for Elizabeth? We've got a bit of time. I think for me, it's a great bit of celebration stuff around Kickstart, because it was a pretty dribs and drabs coming out, but we got a good engagement with the DWP on it from the work that ERSA did, and then Clarion coming to the fore. And we need to, as we go through the next year, really celebrate what we've collectively achieved and transforming lives, helping people on that journey. It's a great success story.